Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the November 14th, 2018 ITAB meeting to order, and I'll start by asking Leslie to take a roll call.
Senator Dennis?
Wait, but somehow we're just touch the side.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, here we go. Here.
Assemblyman Hambrick?
Assemblyman Hambrick, actually, his wife called me. He just had surgery, and so he's still in recovery, so he won't be here today.
Chairman Diflo?
Here.
Director Cates?
Here.
Director Whitley? Director Malfabon? Ms. McGee? Here. Mr. Betts?
Here.
Mr. Marcella?
Here.
Ms. Srinivas?
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Leslie. That'll take us to agenda item number 2, which are the public comments. So I want to start here in the north. Are there any public comments here in Carson? Seeing none, I will ask if there's any public comments in the south.
None down here, Chairman Diflo.
Ryan, you know what?
Thanks, Joe. We will keep this item open until we get down to agenda item 11. And that'll take us to comments by the chair, agenda item 3. You'll notice we have a small agenda today, so it's possible we might be giving all of you back some time this afternoon. If you recall from the August meeting, based on the wording of the agenda, we were unable to take action in the form of voting to endorse or not endorse the findings of the NCJIS modernization efforts. So we're going to be revisiting that today when we get to agenda item number 6. We'll be asking Mindy to summarize the findings and clarify the scope for all of us, because that project, as you heard last time, evolved into a slightly larger effort. And if we're going to vote to endorse, we really need to understand the specifics. So I encourage all of you to get any questions clarified that you may have. On a different topic today, I've been asked by the UNR IT Advisory Board, of which both myself and Mr. Betts are members, to share a little bit about their internship program. So UNR currently has 35 students in their IS Master's program, and at some point during their program, they require a semester-long internship at a local business or at a state or county agency. The students should be given a specific task to accomplish as part of a larger project, or be given a problem or a challenge to solve by the end of the semester. This task needs to be measurable for the purposes of evaluating their success. Now I say this, likely the earliest start window is going to be the spring semester in January 2019, or even the fall semester of the same year. But if any of you would like more information about the program, I would encourage you to contact either myself or Mr. Betts about it. And that'll take us down to agenda item 4, approval of the minutes. So I would ask if I can get a motion to approve.
I do have one change, Sherry McGee for the record.
Okay.
It's on page 8, and it's the second reference from the bottom under my name, and it's the word right, should be ride. So
Okay.
if you can change that.
Leslie, can you make that change? Thank you.
That's all I had. Thank you.
All right. And still looking for a motion to approve?
With that change, I motion to approve.
And can I ask for a second?
Second.
So approved. With that, I would like to invite Eric Pennington up to review the... I'm sorry, correct? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't at that meeting.
Very good. Now it is approved. And I'd like to invite Eric Pennington up, Agency IT Services, to review the project status dashboard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Eric Pennington, I'm the manager of the PMO for Enterprise IT Services for the Agency IT Services Unit. I will be presenting to you the project status report. In the last meeting, we went entirely through the report from front to back. This time, I'd like to propose that we approach it from taking a look at the projects that we currently have at risk, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have for those projects that are proceeding as planned, if that's okay with the board.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, if you'll turn to page 6. This project is called DPS CCH modernization. This is a project's been in the works for quite some time. We made a partial delivery of that in May of 2018. There's still some work to be done. And right now, we've got the issue we've got with that project is the allocation of resources. We've got a number of critical prioritized projects for DPS and their compliance unit. And so as we're estimating out the other prioritized projects, we're trying to figure out how to get resources on that. But we are shooting, right now, we're shooting for a June 30th completion date on the rest of the work for this project. Any questions or concerns? Okay. On page 7, this is the restructured Otis modernization project. And this project is currently on hold. We were unable to successfully complete the project within the budget and the time frame that we had. We are right now taking steps to turn over every stone, and we're writing an RFI to understand what vendors or products are out in that space. This is going to be presented during the legislative session, so we have an understanding of what that cost is going to be, and that effort's going to be if the decision is made to go out for COTS products or a consultant who's already built something of that nature. But we've also prepared our own estimate of what it will take to finish this project if we're given the opportunity to restart it.
For the record, Paul Diflo. Eric, could you articulate the risk of not doing this?
For the record, Eric Pennington. Yeah, there's actually a lot of risk. There's always an issue of that crashing, and this system is used to track and monitor and supervise offenders who have been through our criminal justice system. And the risk is really to the public safety as well as officer safety. So we're talking about people who are charged with criminal cases that go on probation, and even criminal offenders coming out of the Department of Corrections being monitored through this system. So not going through and completing this project, it puts the state at some risk.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a little commentary to that, because I was involved in that. We went to IFC a few weeks ago to inform them that we're calling a halt to the project. The project, the scope of the project, the coding has been essentially complete. Really, it's down to testing, UAT, and data conversion, which is quite a bigger beast than I think people realized at the beginning. We were looking at, I believe the number was $1.5 million in additional funds, and I think it was another 12 months, if I remember the timeline, to completion, so it's very close. The problem I think we ran into was really a credibility problem. When this project was originally scoped several years ago, it was scoped as a $1.7 million project, and they have continued to come back and ask for more money and more time. But to keep it in perspective, the consultant with DPS estimated that this project using a COT solution without customization would be a $10 million project. And EATS, way back when, before any of our tenure, proposed that it could be done for $1.7 million. And I just don't think that number was ever credible. If we had gotten the $1.5 million and that really was it, we would be looking at a $5.3 million project, which I don't think is a bad deal for a custom system that meets all of their needs. I really think in discussion with the governor's office, there was just a lot of frustration. There was a lot of frustration at IFC that here we were again with a new timeline and more money. So we decided to table it and bring it back to the next legislature to make a decision. And we are looking at other solutions, COT solutions, consultants, whatever that may be. I believe, based on what we know right now, that the correct answer is going to be to finish the project that we've already started. But we want to make sure we do our due diligence and let the legislature weigh into that. And there is risk the longer we wait. So we're really hoping we can get that moving in the next session.
Thank you. Sherry, do you have a question?
So I was looking, you have this project, the CCH modernization project, and there's 14 active projects with DPS and 16 initiatives on the table. So I was just wondering, in looking at these projects, how you're saying you're having a resource issue. So I'm kind of curious how all those other projects are going, if anything can be rolled up. Is there things that can be consolidated as you're looking for another vendor that might be able to address some of these other projects and maybe ease you guys up a little bit?
We've been working with DPS to prioritize our projects. So when we look at 16 initiatives, probably need to go through and revise that number. Some of those are going to be rolled up into the MTG study modernization that they're looking at. So that reduces that number. But yes, the projects, we are strapped for resources. So we have MSA staff, we have 5 MSA programmers on staff, along with our regular DevOps staff. So just keeping up with the maintenance as well as the projects been a challenge. What we did do is ask DPS, mostly the compliance division, to really prioritize what they wanted to get done by the end of this fiscal year, just to kind of line up with those resources that may get pulled off back onto the Otis project. So right now we've got the 3 AB 579, the CCH modernization, and some end-of-life servers that we're going to be replacing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay, go ahead, Derek.
Thank you. If you'll turn to page 10, this is a server group project. It's called VX Rail. This project, the primary site was installed in February 2018. The secondary site's been installed. Right now, we're waiting for the installation of a power module at the switch facility. It's a custom build, so it could take a little bit of time. It may impact the completion on this project. Understanding that this report was written at the end of October, so it's been a couple weeks. I haven't had an opportunity to contact that manager and find out if they made any progress.
That's So I have a question on that one, too. I was curious, being Switch and with all the other entities out there, why we have to have a custom power solution. Is there an issue there that something we're doing that's causing that customization?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for you right this minute, but I can find out for
Okay,
you
I'd
shortly.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. And then on to page 11, again, it's another server group project, the Commvault replacement. There was a delay in some equipment delivery, and this is causing the project to slip. We were expecting to get completed by mid-November, so that would put us right at completion date. But again, I haven't been able to contact that manager and find out if they've made that progress. But it's something we're watching because the schedule has slipped. On page 13, this is a project from our network group. It's called the Bigger Pipes Core Infrastructure. We're expecting now that the project will be completed by the end of this month, November 30th. Right now, they're waiting for delivery of long-reach fiber optic transceivers. So all of the other work's been done, just waiting for this equipment now. Any questions? And that's it for the projects that we considered at risk or needing immediate action. Do you have any questions about any of the other projects that are in green status?
This is Senator Dennis.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So I just, on that last one, the Bigger Pipes Core Infrastructure, where it says on the challenges, the complexity, it said has an impact on enterprise stability. What does that mean? I mean, how much of an impact? I mean, what's the real impact of that?
That's a good question. Again, I'm going to fall back on, I would have to really lean on somebody from the network group to answer that question. I can certainly do that. It is core network infrastructure, and this runs between Reno and Las Vegas. So, you know, failure in the network itself like that, maybe should invite somebody else to talk about it. Thank you.
Looks like we have Dave coming from the network team.
Thanks, Dave.
Good afternoon. For the record, Dave Hawes, Administrator for EATS. When we talk about the stability of this particular project, keep in mind that we're hooking up the network, an existing network, and we're also putting these pipes in place. And so what we want to avoid is having any kind of downtime as a result of those pipes not working properly. So when you read through there that says that we do proper due diligence, we want to make sure that we test these pipes out, make sure they're functioning properly so that the network continues to operate as expected. So that's what we want to avoid, is any kind of instability in our wide area network.
So this is Senator Dennis. Does that mean you'll be able to test it all before you switch it over?
Yeah, in fact, they are testing it now. That's part of what we're doing as we speak.
So then the only impact then is if after you've tested it, it's working fine, you switch it over and you miss something, right? I mean, that's the only real issue that would cause a stability issue.
Correct. Dave Haas for the record. And again, you know, that's the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid. So we're trying to do all the type of testing that we need to ensure that it's functioning properly before we switch it over. You know, something like this, you know, there's a lot of traffic that goes through this network. You know, it's conceivable that something would occur that disrupts it, but we're prepared to look at those kinds of things and rectify things as quickly as possible. But for sure, we want to test it as thoroughly as we possibly can to avoid any significant interruptions, if any at all.
So the is plan B, if it doesn't work, you can just switch it back?
Dave Hawes for the record. That's correct. The plan is to switch it back. So it's, as I understand it, and they're not here to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's already, the pipeline is in place, and so we're testing it out. So we're already operating in a production mode with the current pipeline, and now we're testing out this new infrastructure. And so we have the ability to kind of to flip back and forth if we need to. So I anticipate that if there are problems that we would be able to switch back.
And in that production test that you're doing, are you actually running data, I mean, are you actually running traffic through their at equivalent capacities?
Dave Hawes for the record. I'm sorry, Senator, I don't know for sure exactly that test plan, but I can certainly find that out for you.
Okay, I'm just, I know we always try to make stuff work right, but I'm just worried about that particular pipe because that's what connects the north to the south, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and
It's our main pipeline throughout the state, and we do want it to work properly.
we don't have, currently have a secondary pipeline that connects us, right?
Dave Hawes for the record. There are some, I'm not sure of the question, we do have some redundancy that occurs within the network that's built into it. So I'm not sure of your question.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of that. I mean, because I know for the longest time, we've only had the Reno to Las Vegas, but I know that we've been working to connect other parts of Nevada to have a second way to do that, and I just didn't know if that was in place yet.
Yeah, and of course, this particular project will in fact provide a lot of that additional redundancy that you're describing. This connects us up through Switch, which will be able to take advantage of the network there. And so there's some cross-linking, if you will, between our primary nodes to make it more resilient and less susceptible to downtime.
Okay, thank you.
Could, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I could just add on to Administrator Hawes's comments, and I'm really speaking at the edge of my knowledge here, but based on my hanging out with the network group, I do know there is redundancy currently, and it routes out of state. I believe there is a route that runs through Utah, and if I'm not mistaken, maybe California as well. But the bandwidth isn't big enough to handle the north-south connection in terms of disaster recovery backup, and the switch connection will then be our big backbone, which is much bigger than our current capacity. And as I understand it, we'll still have all that redundancy with a big 4-lane highway going right to Las Vegas. And I would also add that I think we have some extremely talented network people, network engineers working for us, and they've done incredible work for a long time around the state. And we have had a very stable network for a long time, and I think the wording in this report reflects their caution and their diligence. And you know, they're a small group, and they are working with Switch, who I think probably has the best network engineers in the world working for them, and they're not going to turn it on until they're assured it's going to be stable and not cause any failures for the state.
Thank you, Director Gates. For the record, Paul Diplo. Director Gates, you mentioned that with the current infrastructure, there's an inability to do disaster recovery. That means network disaster recovery. There's a manual disaster recovery though, right? Like whether even that's tapes?
For the record, yes, there is disaster recovery across different systems, but a online backup between Vegas and Reno. This is part of what this is facilitating. There's not enough bandwidth to do that currently.
Perfect, thank you.
Dave Hawes for the record. I would add, if you're asking if our applications and our systems and our databases are backed up, yes, we are doing that.
Yeah, I was really looking at the comment where the current network infrastructure is not prepared to support cloud computing solutions and not be able to support disaster recovery on SilverNet. But I'm thinking that there's probably a manual way to do a disaster recovery for SilverNet, even if it's not over the network.
Yeah, Dave Hawes for the record. That is correct. Part of our problem is just the pipeline being big enough to send data down to Las Vegas, for example, to allow our disaster recovery to be real time in some cases. And so that's why we're wanting to put the larger pipe in, so that we can have that kind of redundancy in our site that's in a switch south.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you, Dave.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one other comment. If you look at Las Vegas, we have 2 data centers down there. One's a backup for the other, disaster recovery, but having that in the same city is not exactly the ideal configuration. So it's not that don't have backup, but to be able to do it geographically dispersed like that is what we're trying to get to.
Very good. Eric, anything else?
I think I've covered everything unless you have questions about some of the other projects.
Any questions from the board for these gentlemen?
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank staff for the report. I just want to point out to the members that this is a report of just agency IT services projects, and that is a small subset of all the projects that are going on around the state. I mean, you hear about the things that admin's doing, that EAT's doing in terms of infrastructure, and you hear about DPS because those are the ones they directly serve on projects. But that in no way encompasses the projects that the state is doing across agencies. And I think something that this body ought to consider is we have the TIN process, and that goes through the IT Strategic Planning Committee. And I think if this committee is going to get updates on projects, that we might want to in the future invite other agencies to give similar updates, especially for things that have big dollar TINs. Because you're just looking at this when there's all this out there actually going on. And I think the committee can provide insight and feedback to all the state agencies and not just agency IT services.
Yeah, that's a good point, Director. I think we should talk about that when we put together the next agenda.
Mr. Chair, this is Senator Dennis. I would just want to echo that I agree. I think that I agree. There's so many other big projects out there, and I think this group is a good one to take a look at those. Because when we see this stuff like at IFC or during the legislatures, we don't have that much expertise in the legislature on IT things. So having a group like this to look at that kind of thing, I think it would be very helpful to look at the bigger picture.
Thank you for your comments. Gentlemen, thank you. That will take us down to agenda item 6. I'd like to invite Mindy McCabe up to present.
Good afternoon, Chair Difflow, members of the board. Mindy McKay, Nevada Department of Public Safety, Records, Communications, and Compliance Division, and I am the Records Bureau Chief here on behalf of Julie Butler, Division Administrator, who unfortunately is unable to be here today. So just lead me in which direction you'd like me to go. I understand that she had provided a presentation to you back in August. There was a slide presentation that was provided as part of that. I did provide you all with a list of bullet points as to what was requested specific to the importance and necessity of moving forward, the risks of doing nothing, and the method for selection of a replacement solution. So I don't know if you want me to just give a really brief refresher of what NCDIS modernization is, and then I can go into the bullet points in the document.
If you would, Mindy, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So in the presentation that Julie gave, there was a slide, number 8, that talked about the next steps. We had a 2012 study conducted by MTG Consultants, and unfortunately, that study recommendation was not followed at that time, so we brought them back in to do a refresh of their study to help us kind of get back on track, guide us where we really need to be in order to make this successful and make it more timely. And so with that refresh, and I do have a copy, if anybody would like it, I can provide it, of the executive summary, so you don't have to read the 400-page document of the refresh study, but they do provide an executive summary, so I'm happy to provide that to you. And it outlines, again, where they would recommend that we go with modernization of our Nevada Criminal Justice Information System. And it pretty much is the same as the 2012 study, replacing our switch. The thing about this, though, now is the imminency of Our small, tiny little vendor, population 1, sometimes he hires some help here and there. He has expressed his interest in retiring. Now, when we talked to him, that was a year ago, and so a year ago, it was in 2 to 5 years. So now it's in 1 to 4 years. It could be 1 year, it could be 4 years. And it could be a little bit longer, hopefully, because the refresh study is suggesting that we replace everything within 7 years. Beginning with the switch, which is the vendor, Norsoft Consulting, who provides the switch for us at this time. He's the gentleman who's wishing to retire. Replacement of the switch, replacement of our CCH, which is our computerized criminal history system. She had talked to you about, maybe you've heard that we did already kind of modernize our CCH, and we're extensive, and it provides a lot of functionality that we need, and we need it now. And there are products out there across the nation that provide a full-on CCH that we can just bring in the vendor, plug it in, and it gives us everything we need without having to have a part 1 and a part 2. So we are looking at including a new CCH along with the modernization items. We also, along with the switch, we have hot files. Those are information files that are used by our criminal justice agencies, not only statewide but nationwide, to access information regarding such things as active wants and warrants, whether someone is currently on parole or probation, they're dangerous offenders, whether they're a registered sex offender. It also allows them to look up driver's licenses, registration information, protection order information, domestic violence protection order information, I should clarify. Those hot files are used to access information to assist the officers on the street, what they need to know when they're coming into contact with the subject. We also need to, as part of that, the vendor, not only does he provide the switch, but he also provides some civil applications for us. So we have our civil applicant program that he provides through his system for fingerprint submissions for such things as employment, licensing, adoptions, things that are civil related, but use criminal information to make determinations. He provides that, so that needs to be replaced as well. He also provides our accounting system, so we do charge for the civil applicant. We also charge for our Brady firearms background check system, which he also provides the Brady firearms background check system, so we need to modernize that as well, get away from him from that. We also have what we call a civil name check program, and it is what it says it is. It's a name check-based background check for civil purposes for employment. And he also provides that, which is embedded in his switch as well. And along with that, so we need to modernize and hopefully go out COTS solution for cloud purposes and the newest and greatest, and I'm not techie, you're gonna learn that real quick, the latest and greatest and the best business practices out there to make sure that we stay current and we stay in compliance, and we have the support and security that we need to protect this information. But we also would like to have a portal, which is brand new. We don't have something like that right now, so we'd like to attach that to all of these as well. And so we have a lot of different things that we need to modernize and decouple from this spaghetti bowl of Norsoft products, because the gentleman would like to retire, as would I. So, so we need to modernize this, get it in compliance, get it supported, get it decoupled. And so with that, with regard to the list that was provided to you with the bullet points on it, the questions that were asked for me to provide to you today, importance and necessity of moving forward, I just want to, in the forefront, bring to the attention of the fact that this is public and officer safety. So I'm going to say that a lot. This is public and officer safety. You are the public, your loved ones are the public, the state is the public, the people who visit this state is the public, and so we need to make sure that the system is available at all times with all information for those criminal justice agencies out there that need this in order to make sure that we have safe and livable communities. So we're making sure that we're in compliance with and in line with the governor's goals. We're making sure that these criminal justice agencies, again, not only in our state but nationwide, have access to these systems to keep us all safe. We need to make sure that these systems are available in order for us, my division internally, to use it for those civil applications, and all of our customers who use it as well for the civil name check program, and of course making sure that the firearms dealers out there have access to us and we have access to the system so they can sell their guns. And so making sure that everyone has access, that these systems are supported by hopefully a vendor that's larger than a one-man band. Making sure that it is updated, supported, it's not vulnerable to security threats, that it's not overly complex. And if you would like a copy of what I offered up earlier, along with that copy is going to be this lovely diagram of what our current system looks like, and it's a mess. And it's very complex, and it doesn't need to be that way. So in the study that MTG refreshed for us, they gave us a much prettier picture of what it really should look like, which is not so much a mess. It's still very complex, but it's not tightly interwoven. So we want to make sure that we make it more user-friendly, easier to take care of, and ensure that it's not at an imminent risk of failure. The risks of doing nothing: we could have major, unplanned long-term outages with potential tragic consequences, loss of life. Again, this is public and officer safety. Inability to comply with FBI and current state requirements. We have a lot of requirements that come down from the FBI because we are the CJIS systems agency for the state of Nevada as a liaison to the FBI for access to their systems, and this system is the switch in order to pass that information through those pipelines to make sure that the agencies in Nevada have access to FBI information as well. And it's not just FBI information, but there's a system called NLETS that allows us direct access to states without having to go through the FBI's system. We can go direct to the state through the NLETS highway. And so the agencies also have access to other states and also to Canada and Mexico. And they are able to get similar criminal justice information system through NLETS to the other states. And then session's coming, and we never know what's going to come down every legislative session. Making sure that our systems are capable and ready to modify or add on to any mandates that come down, not only from legislative session for the state, but also from the FBI as well. And there was a question about the method for selection of a replacement solution. So we are requesting MTG's assistance with drafting the requests for proposals for all of these different systems. And so we are going to be working very closely with them very soon to gather the requirements for that, for the scope of work, making sure that we give them everything that we need in order to have those RFPs very detailed and ready to hit the streets, hopefully in July. And again, that's going to be looking for an off-the-shelf and cloud-based solutions. Your buzzwords are co-location, cloud, and consolidation. We want to go with that. And then the estimated cost, and I do want to point out this is a little bit higher than what the slide presentation originally was presented to you back in August. The slide presentation that Julie presented was $54 million, but we've added a program or project management office and staff to go with that, hopefully. And so that did increase the cost to about $58 million. And again, it's going to be over the course of 7 years in order to replace all of this. The funding source is to be determined. We have been in talks with the various budget people to try to put our heads together and try to figure out where we're going to get $58 million from over the course of the next 7 years. We do have some reserves. Obviously, it's not enough, and so we are going to do everything we can to find the money that we need in order to replace these systems as soon as we can. So any suggestions you might have are welcome to that. And I hope that that was everything that you would like me to present to you today. I'm available for questions.
For the record, Paul Deflo. Mindy, I think it's important for the board to understand the importance of this project. So we just saw, Eric went over all the projects, all the DPS projects. Where would you rank this one?
Number one.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. Secondly, in the private sector, unplanned projects come up quite a bit, and if it's not funded, a lot of times the business unit has to look to other projects they have going on and maybe pause those in order to put the investment toward the priority project. Is that something that DPS would be willing to do?
Mindy McKay for the record. So with respect to all of our projects that we have, and we have approximately 30 plus TINs out there, Most of those, the majority, probably 99% of them, they're mandates. We can't really put them on pause. So again, there is going to be that resource constraint. We do try to prioritize where we can. We do try to say no where we can, but very often we don't have the ability to do that. It's something coming down that we have no control over. That's a mandate that we have to comply with. But those things that we do have control over, we do try to either find a different way, bring in different resources, put them on hold if we can, find, maybe manual workarounds for the time being. And we have been doing that. We will continue to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I just have one other question, then I'd like the rest of the board to ask their questions. We're obviously in a vulnerable situation with this one-man vendor. Is there anything, do you know if there's anything in the contract that says you have to give us X number of years warning and support before end-of-lifing this software? Have the lawyers looked into that?
Mindy McKay, for the record, not to my knowledge. I don't know exactly what the contract with him says, so I'm happy to go back and look at that. And I can provide an answer to you with respect to that question.
Okay, thank you.
And for the record, Sherry McGee.
Sure.
A one-man shop, the contract's probably the least of the concern. Anything can happen day to day, and
Drop
so,
over.
yeah, it's a huge concern for sure.
What other questions do we have for Mindy?
Senator Dennis.
Senator?
So I just want to follow along in that, because that's, my concern wasn't so much the contract. If the guy gets sick and, is unable to, then what do we do? Do we have like a backup for that? Is there, I'm sure that, he's the expert on it because he's been working on it for years. But is there any way to have some kind of a, because in the documentation that we got, under the risk of doing nothing, it says potential tragic consequences, loss of life. But it also says that this particular vendor is doing several of the systems. I don't know if that relates to any of the systems that he's doing relate to possible potential tragic consequences. But if that's the case, is there a backup? If he has a heart attack today and dies, what do we do?
This is Susie Block, Agency IT Services Chief, for the record. I'd like to answer that. So we have a team of engineers that actually support the Justice Link application. So we have 3 full-time members of our staff that are very familiar with the configurations and have looked under the hood at some of the source code. So to say that it's just one person, yes, Scott Norberg, who is Norsoft, is the primary member, but my team has supported this system for probably the last 20 years. So there is some institutional knowledge, but as the technology gets more and more aged, and it becomes a support issue. So I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a backup to me. As long as they know at least something of how it's working, that they can get in there, they would be able to eventually figure stuff out. It sounds like if they've been doing this for 20 years and doing the backup to it, so.
Yes, to answer your question, so for the record, Susie Block, we are 24/7 support of J-Link, so we are the first responders if there are issues. So normally comes in through the help desk if there is an issue, and my team normally responds if the help desk can't respond to it. So they're very, very familiar with the application, but again, as we need to modernize this effort, one-man shop is not going to be able to keep up to date with all of that.
Yeah, thank you. That makes me feel better that at least I know there's not just a one-man shop, but that we also have some backup to that, so thank you.
This is Mindy McKay, for the record. I do want to add to that. Thank you, Susie. So that question was asked during Julie Butler's presentation, and Mr. Hawes had come up and spoke to that with respect to what Susie said. But I just want to point out as well that Mr. Norberg has not documented anything that would be helpful or useful, if anything at all, actually, and he does not use industry best standard practices. And again, what he has built is in his head, the way he built it, and it is completely enmeshed in each other. It's a big spaghetti bowl of You pull one string, it's connected to another, that's connected to another, and you don't know where that's going to lead. And to try to reverse engineer this would be very difficult. While the current EITS staff does have some support activities that they provide for the Justice Link system, they don't have all of it, my understanding. And what he has locked up in his head, again, is probably his own language that we may not understand. And so to have to reverse engineer that and really deeply get under the hood and try to figure out what is the foundation of this system, I believe would be very difficult and time consuming. And in the interim of the EITS staff trying to do that, who knows what catastrophic failures could happen. And if Mr. Norberg is not around to help solve those catastrophic failures, we're dead in the water, blind on the street.
Okay, so now you're making me not feel good
Sorry.
about it.
It's the truth. It's reality.
Yeah, well, and that's my concern. Obviously, it doesn't sound. I mean, it sounds like we got kind of a partial thing, but not really, because we have one person that knows everything, and everybody else has little pieces of it. So I guess we just have to cross our fingers that nothing happens between now and when we were able to put something in place. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, we're trying to do everything we possibly can, which is why we're in front of you today, why we've been in front of you. We're happy to come back. We're happy to go to other committees and bodies of people to get what we need when we need it to get this done and taken care of so we can all sleep better at night and know that not only, are we and our loved ones protected, but the officers out there and everyone who visits the state is protected as well. So we need the funding and we need this now. We cannot wait any longer. And I mean, it may be too late. I hope it's not. But anything else that I can provide, anything else to anyone else that you can think of, we're happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sherry.
For the record, Sherry McGee. So I'm looking at your 3710s or whatever that from the last meeting that we had. Are there public safety suites out there that we could roll up and maybe knock off half this list all at once as we do this project? Is there a chance of that?
Mindy McKay, for the record, I'd have to go back and refresh myself on all of those. I don't have them all memorized, but going off of what Eric Pennington said earlier, I'm sure that some of those probably wrap up into this NCGIS modernization effort. And but I'd have to go back and take a look at those to see we have really sat down multiple times, and we do it every so often, to sit down, review everything that we have on the table. What can we do? How can we do it better? Who can do it for us? What resources can we bring in? But I'm happy to do that again and get back to you on that.
For the record, Sherry McGee, I just want to make sure that you're looking at that when you're looking at other vendors and maybe at least throwing the other systems out there or enhancements that you're looking at, so it gives a vendor an opportunity to say something, especially if you might not have done the research or don't know if those things exist. Having the internal conversation's good, but, to make sure you're getting that information out to the vendor community is key too, because you might find the vendor out there that can consolidate a lot of this stuff into one project, so thank you.
For the record, Paul Difflow, that's a very good point. Sherry, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, was this the one that you said you've already engaged Gartner to talk about the options of what different vendors are out there? You have, maybe that's something that we could do.
Mindy McKay, for the record. So MTG, management consultants that we have contracted with to do the refresh, this is their area of expertise, and we have asked them to, as they're working through this with us, that they can look for vendors that can do multiple items in one big shot. And so there are a few of them out there nationwide that provide such systems to other states where they provide a switch and a CCH and perhaps a hot files system, portals. Yes, they do. There are some vendor agencies out there that provide multiple items in one package.
Thank you, Mindy. Are there any other questions? I think you both have presented the urgency of this very well, and this is, I think, where the board can add some value by endorsing this project. So I mentioned earlier that this is the agenda item that we want to we want to ask, I guess I'm asking for a motion to take a vote. And this is the type of vote that we would do, Leslie, just like a roll call. We'll do an individual yay or nay on this. So I'd like to ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to support this project.
I think we need
Is that the motion we
I
want?
need a motion to take a vote for the board to endorse.
To endorse, okay. So we want a motion for the board to endorse the NCGIS modernization project as presented by the agency.
Let me check with Jeff.
How's that?
Should we have a motion to take a vote to endorse, as opposed to,
No, you make a
Endorse.
motion, then you vote on it.
I think one motion would suffice to take the vote to endorse or not.
okay. Let's ask for that motion to endorse then.
Okay, I'll make a motion to endorse the NCGIS modernization project as presented by staff.
Thank you, Director. I'd like to ask for a second.
Sherry McGee for the record, I'll second.
Thank you, Sherry. And now I'd like to ask Leslie to,
Discussion?
oh, I'm
Discussion on the
sorry,
motion.
yes, let's open it up for discussion.
I just wanted to make a statement that I have read the consultant's report, at least the executive summary, and I did get a presentation along with GFO on the plan, and I think it's solid. I think it calls for COT solutions. I think they're trying to create an office of project management office to manage this. It's really big. I think that's best practice. It's what we've done with the Smart 21 project that you'll hear about later. You know, once upon a time, back after that original report was done in 2012, decisions were made to try to in-house, do all this stuff in-house. And I don't think that's a strategy that we endorse today, and I think the direction they're trying to go aligns well with the broader vision the state has for IT projects and how we're trying to approach them.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Any other comments, any other discussion? Okay, now I'll ask Leslie to take a vote.
Senator Dennis,
Yes.
Chairman Diflo,
Yes.
Director Cates,
Yes.
Ms. McGee,
Yes?
Mr. Betts,
Yes.
Mr. Marsala,
Yes.
Ms. Srinivas.
Yes.
Chairman, we have 7 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion is carried then. All right, we can excuse you. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to invite Susie to stay, and she can give us our ADA follow-up.
Good afternoon, ITAB members. Again, for the record, Susie Block. I am the Agency IT Services Chief. I work for EATS. Linda did probably an amazing job giving you an update, probably more than you ever want to know on ADA and all of the wonderful work that's going on within the team. So she basically gave me 3 pages of wonderful efforts since the last meeting, so I'm going to try and do it some justice. But basically, all of the information is, we have an ADA website. I don't know if you had an opportunity to look at that, but all the notes are included, as well as a breakdown from each ITAB meeting of the report. So I would encourage you, if you haven't seen it, that is available on the website under ada.mv.gov. Just real high level, we have an additional 3 websites that have been made compliant, so that totals 15 websites out of 118 remaining. So let's see, 13 websites are partially remediated, which means To give you kind of a ballpark, 4,958 were remediated, PDFs, which leaves a remaining 70,651. And I believe at the last meeting, if we were just going to use existing staff, what that effort looked like, I think we said it was like 100 years of man hours. So just to kind of put that into perspective, as we move forward through this, we're looking at options of outreach with other agencies to have them crowdsource the effort. So those are some of the things that we're doing today. We hired our intern, great news. He is now a full-time position. We were able to get him as a trainee, so that's kind of exciting, showing that the interns that we're bringing in through EATS, we're able to kind of help them with a career path. So we're going to be recruiting for that position. We're currently going to be recruiting for that replacement position. His name is Robert Schrader, and he was an intern for over 11 months. He's remediated over 1,600 documents. He's become our resident expert, so we're real proud of the work he's done. We've trained, since the last time Linda presented, Department of Human Services, all divisions, Department of Human Resources on the job specs, the Division of Nevada Highway Patrol, and we have their new ADA website, so very proud of the team on that. The Division of Purchasing, and the team also created remediation guides and written the documentation, test documents, and webinars. So one of the things that we were asked to do by folks that were on the content management system was to create some reports to kind of help them identify documents that could be deleted. So the team basically created several reports. I won't go through all the reports, but the three top reports were documents that were sorted in highest based on descending order. So it listed every document within the website, whether it be a PDF, Word, YouTube, sorts report in descending order by number of pages and gave them a grand total so they knew kind of what the scope of the project was. And then basically what this will do is it'll help users see at a glance any unwanted documents. So really what we're trying to get ahead of is not trying to boil the ocean, but say, you know, give them kind of a composition of a sitemap on their website. Report 2 was sorted by date sequence so they could identify documents that are older than 2 years and potentially delete them. And then report 3 was a Google Analytics report that tracked number of clicks on each document. So basically a usability document, you know, based on who was accessing the documents. Other efforts, Linda and the team met with the adaptive technology folks, consumer group, and Thomas Kearns at TMCC. They discussed our plans to add a wheelchair icon on each document, and we've started that as of September 20th. And basically what that does is when clicked, it prompts a message so a user can add their name and address. And then what happens with that is the request will get emailed to the web team, and they can move forward to remediate it. If it's something that we're not able to do, we do some outreach and try to get it to the agencies who owns that document. Okay, and then she put together a report, Linda did, and it's again on the website. But basically, it's since the last meeting, we started this September 20th to present, how many documents were asked to be remediated, and we had a total of 20. So 11 were remediated by EATS, 6 were forwarded to ADA coordinators to remediate, and then we have 3 out there that we're still waiting acknowledgement on, to give you kind of an idea of what's happening out there. Working with our new tool, Seamless Docs. You may be familiar with the web forum initiative that was passed, I want to say in 2013. I'm very proud of the team. We're working with the vendor on compliance of the entire platform, but since the last update, the web builder is ADA compliant, so that's one of the tools that we're using for the form building. Of our pilot projects that we've currently got underway, deferred comp revisions are currently being reviewed as of 11/8/18 with the administrator, so we'll be finalizing the deferred comp workflow. ASD has compliant forms, and we've worked with that group to our Accounting Administrative Services Division to help them. We've trained a couple of their team members to utilize the tool. So basically what we're doing is we've learned it, and now we're teaching fellow team members to utilize the tool within their group. We've got the governor's office forms for the new governor completed, awaiting to be reviewed by the governor's personnel. And let's see here, of those, application for appoint to position of trust, the intern application, invite the governor, request a proclamation, and proclamation guidelines have all been completed. We've worked with Smart 21 staff on some of their form initiatives, and that's underway. Human Resources, we trained one of their business process analysts to do all of the job class specs, so those will be coming. DPS on their flashing amber lights permit was completed. What we're waiting on right now is the integration with ePay, so we're working with the treasurer's office and the vendor to make that happen. Right now, they're currently testing the docs tool, and we've got purchasing as another pilot that we've made 8 of their heavily used forms ADA compliant. So I would just like to say I'm very proud of the team on their efforts for that. And then moving forward, Site Improve is the tool. We had a very minimal license. I'm happy to report that my budget was able to actually purchase a statewide license to begin January 1st. And basically what this will allow is the website owners to monitor and remediate their entire website. So that's going to be really huge for us to be able to provide that level of reporting back to the state. But we do have a budget initiative in 2021 to continue funding that. So that is an enhancement for my budget, so I hope you will help us support that as that goes through the legislative process on that. And basically, the licenses will cover websites out of the state CMS. So initially we were looking internally, but after discussing with our director Cates and Michael Dietrich, you know, we wanted to be able to cover the state of the whole. So that's what we're doing. Let's see, just to give you a real quick update on that project. November 28th, we were scheduled to start the outreach and get it ready for the implementation for other users. And then licenses will be released gradually so Site Improve and users have time to understand the tool. So there'll be training, there'll be governance and onboarding kind of through the web team, but there'll be more to come on that. And we're going to be leveraging folks that we've been meeting with and roundtables through the PIOs. Those are some of the outreach of who we've talked to about Site Improve. So let's see. Here's a plug for Linda. She put a nice little bullet. This is an exceptional benefit to our customers and our CMS and outside of our CMS, so we can give them the tools to make them responsible for their own websites. So that's, I would like to say, in support of the Road to Unity, this is another one of those enterprise tools that can benefit the state that we've made an investment initially on. So just real quickly, meetings and outreach. Richard Whitley, director of DHHS, is continuing to move his division's websites towards ADA compliance. We've had several meetings. We've actually trained many of their divisions, and we were able to participate in a steering committee with them to help train them on document remediation. So really appreciate the director's support on working with us, and they were kind of our pilot for collaboration, but that has been going very well. And I don't know if Val Hoffman's in the crowd, but thank you, Val, for supporting us. So she's been kind of our go-to person on that. And then we're going to continue to communicate with our CMS users and extend outreach. We continue to update the ADA website on the collaborations that we have and events that we're holding, and also soliciting input from the user community. I mean, we continue to want to learn. We met with Thomas Kearns and the AT consumers. I think I said that earlier, but also gave them an update on what we're doing around this, and they were very pleased to see that we kind of were being very proactive. And that brings me to kind of the last closing point. The National Federation of the Blind, we had received an email from Terry Rupp on September 12th, basically stating that she was going to be sending a draft compliance agreement And that compliance agreement was sent yesterday, and I know our leadership will be reviewing that, so there will be more to come on that compliance agreement and what the National Federation of the Blind is asking the state of Nevada to do to support ADA initiatives within the state. And that is pretty much what I have. So I will open it up for any questions you may have.
For the record, this is Paul Dithlow. Thank you for a very comprehensive presentation, Susie. That was good. This tool that you purchased, do you have any idea what the rate of remediation improvement's going to be percentage-wise?
Great question. For the record, Susie Block. Again, I can just base it on what we've done today. Robert, as you heard the stats we used with that tool, the fact that within 9 months, kind of as a brand new person, was able to remediate over 1,600 just himself is huge. And some of these were very complex documents. So I think if you teach a person to fish, and depending on what kind of resource you get, we could really get ahead of this. So we're really looking to collaborate the outreach and help folks. I think we've got an excellent strategy with the training, the tools. Linda's leadership has been amazing, but the web team is really in support of this. And again, I want to thank Val Hoffman. I want to publicly say that for just kind of the outreach and helping us get into DHHS to help them with their websites. So.
Great. Thank you, Susie. Any questions? All right. Nice job.
Thank you.
I would like to go down to agenda item 8 and invite Brett Harvey, Office of Project Management, to give us an update on Smart 21.
For the record, Patrick Cates, I thought Brett and I would talk to you about this jointly. Brett Harvey is the project manager for Smart 21.
For the record, Brett Harvey.
He has been with the state for quite some time. He was with EATS before he came on to the Smart 21 project, and he brings a lot of experience and expertise to this very big project. So Brett prepared an overview that I think addressed some of the questions that were brought up at the last meeting. I apologize I was not able to make that meeting. I had a conflict. I also sit on the Public Works Board, and we were in two-day, all-day meetings to consider agencies' public works requests. So I apologize I wasn't here to talk about this project. Michael Dietrich did a good job of trying to fill in the gaps, but he hasn't been as close to this project as I have. I'm one of the executive committee members for Smart 21. And I've actually been associated with it probably even longer than Brett has.
Yes, you have.
But you've been very immersed in it, though, for quite some time, more than I have. So I'll just very briefly give you a little bit of overview that's in the report. So Smart 21 is the state's ERP system replacement. It includes financial administration, human resource management, which includes payroll. That would be replacing the core Advantage system that we have today that's 18, 19 years old, going on 20 years. That system was put in place with heavy customization, and it was out of support the day it was launched. So the state has been using a lot of different systems, which gets to integration platform that is part of this project. Have been using a variety of different systems, from spreadsheets to databases to different types of applications, to bolt on top of the ERP system to handle mostly their financial transactions. So we've got a lot of diversity among agencies in terms of what systems they're using for data analytics, reporting, those kinds of things, because of the limitations of the existing Advantage system. We use, just for instance, we use NEATS for a lot of the HR processes, including payroll timesheets. It doesn't run payroll, but it collects the timesheets. So we have this custom system that's been bolted on to provide features that we didn't get out of the core system. So the project really has been a long time coming. Just very briefly, this goes all the way back to I believe it was 2014, so this would have been the 2013 session when they authorized funding for the Hackett Group to do a study that showed the state's HR financial processes were very outdated, very person-intensive, not very efficient. Then we came back in the 2015 session and we got $1 million to start the exploration process and start approaching an RFP. And we came back in the 2017 session, got $5 million to set up the project office and to develop the RFP and get the project started. Which is kind of where we're at today. If I just skip to the procurement schedule, so the RFP is on the street. It's on the state's website. Really what we are trying to do with the timeline is really be ready to do final negotiations, best and final offers between March and mid-April. So our plan is to bring to the legislature, once we have picked a vendor, and have their proposal and have the legislature approve the funding for the next biennium for that. So I know there were questions and concerns about the costs of the project, and we will have those costs for the legislature to approve in that time frame. I can say, you know, the estimates that we're using right now to put in the budget are $25 million a year. There's a lot of unknowns with this project, and it's hard to compare to other projects. I know the Smart 21 group has done a lot of work in trying to look at other states and what their experience is. They've talked to UNR. These seem like reasonable estimates, but we're in a little bit of, there's not a lot of states that have done a SaaS solution for ERPs. It's fairly new. There are some states that have done pieces of it. There are states that are on the same path that we are to going towards a project, and they're all looking at SaaS solutions. Local governments have done it, private sector has done it, but a big state hasn't done anything quite like this. And the one thing that I know that we heard from vendors when we brought them in for demos last year was really a sense that with a SaaS solution, your implementation costs could be lower than an on-prem solution, but then you have, you know, subscription fees that you have to pay going forward. And based on those conversations back then, those subscription fees are probably going to run $2 to $5 million a year ongoing, just to maintain access to the software. So is 50 million it? No, I don't think 50 million is it. 50 million is our best guess at this point in time of what we'll need in the next biennium. And just to talk briefly about the schedule, so the implementation timeline, I do want to just make clear that there are several pieces to this. There's a couple of big phases. We want to implement this project in phases. I believe at the last meeting, Michael had responded to a question that the project would be completed at the end of the next biennium. That's not correct. He erred in that statement. But the plan would be to roll out phase one January of 2021, which is the HR functionality except for payroll. Then we would roll out payroll by January 2022, and then the financial system, full financial system by July of 2022. I can tell you this is our best guess at what this timeline would look like. In the RFP, we have laid that out, but we have asked vendors to propose their own timeline. I can tell you as one of 3 people on the executive committee, I didn't like this timeline. I didn't feel it was aggressive enough. I felt it was taking too long. However, I also know that particularly in the financial system, there's so much diversity of way people are doing processes. It could possibly take that long before we had every agency rolled out. So we really kind of punted to the vendor to help guide us through that process. I'm very anxious to get any of these pieces going sooner rather than later. I don't want to draw the project out any longer than we have to, but this is a really big lift. What else? Gosh, there's a couple other
So
points I wanted
for the
to-
record, this is Brett Harvey. We're going to allow whoever gets the contract award to come back to us and propose an implementation schedule. But for fairness in the RFP process, we have to keep it, the rules the same for everyone. So we're going to have each vendor propose based on our implementation schedule that we put forward. So just wanted to clear that up.
The other thing I want to mention, the interfaces. Now, we're hopeful that this project is going to replace a lot of those systems. I think we've identified over 100 interfaces
Yeah,
currently.
125
Yeah.
plus.
We're hoping a lot of those will go away, but a lot won't. And we do have other pieces that could be considered part of the ERP that are either in progress now or will be deferred later. For instance, procurement. So in a separate tire, we have, or tin, we have Nevada ePro. That was approved last session before last. That system is in the process of being implemented. In fact, pieces of it are implemented today. In fact, the RFP for Smart 21 is in Nevada ePro and available online. That's one of the bigger interfaces that we are going to have to integrate, because the procurement piece obviously works very closely with financial. Grants is another system that originally was within scope, and we removed that from scope from the RFP. We had a separate project for a grants management system, and what we saw with the vendors is that, with the ERP vendors, is that they handle the financial piece of grants fairly well, but they don't handle the grant administration piece. They don't have those kind of functionalities. That was meant to go forward like Nevada ePro. It was appealed, the award was appealed, and that has gone through a hearing process, and I believe it's going to court. So we can't proceed with that until we get some resolution with that project, but that will be another project that would be working in tandem with the Smart 21 project that would integrate, as well as all those other systems that agencies are using. One other point that I wanted to make in the RFP, and when we had a bidders conference, Brett talked to them about this. We have very strong language in the RFP because this will be out for bid during a legislative session. We are very concerned about bidders lobbying the legislature because we're going to be coming to them and asking them to approve funding. So we've put very strong language in the RFP that tells the bidders if they lobby the legislature about this project at all, they'll be disqualified. That's something we want to make sure all the legislators know when we go forward. And I think the vendors understand that, but it puts us in a little bit of an uncomfortable position to have this be going through a bid process that's confidential by law, and would be concerned that the people who are making the final decisions for funding, that they might be out lobbying them for one vendor versus another. That would be improper.
So for the record, Brett Harvey, so all of the documents related to this RFP are on Nevada ePro, all the schedules, the appendices, it's all public information out there if the board is interested in looking at any requirements, financial requirements, or technical requirements are all posted on Nevada ePro.
For the record, Paul Difflow, what vendors got the RFP? The usual ERP players?
Well, we have a sign-in sheet from the bidders conference, again, which is posted on Nevada ePro. We're going to be using a system integrator to bring in vendors of their choice. So, there could be specific vendors, but typically we're going to be using a system integrator. So they'll reach out to vendors themselves to bring them in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sherry?
Sherry McGee, for the record, what was the thought process about going with an integrator? Can you explain that a little more?
Well, because we're doing a finance and HR system, and we want interoperability and things like that. But we may use one vendor for finance and one vendor for HR, and not consolidate that with one vendor. So that was sort of the thinking behind that. Director Cates may have some more thoughts on that.
I would just add to that we worked with Gartner Consulting to help formulate the RFP and stand up our project office. And Gartner Research, they really talk a lot about, they have papers on the postmodern ERP, and it's really kind of the best of breed that the expectation is you're going to have separate systems that do things well and integrate them together. And that seems to be the path forward. I mean, there's some software sellers that do their own integration, but what most of the states seem to be doing is having an integrator. Some states have, for instance, I believe it was Nebraska, where they actually went out, picked the integrator, and then had the integrator, after they were selected, pick what software they were going to use. Other states have picked software and then got an integrator. We're going to ask integrators to propose whatever they think's best. It's possible an integrator could propose solutions with multiple software products.
Any other questions for Director Cates or Brett Harvey? All right.
Have a comment, not a question.
Okay.
So I just wanted to talk about the ongoing costs with the cloud-based type implementation. And this project's going to be huge for the state of Nevada, and there's going to be a lot of cost savings around processes. So I don't know if you've collected any of that information to articulate that to the legislature, but I think that might help. You know, when you start talking about those ongoing costs and the efficiencies that you're going to get from replacing this system.
For the record, Patrick Cates, I think that's a great point. I have talked about the number of FTEs that we have dedicated today to fiscal and HR processes. I've used the number of 800 FTEs. That's based on job classifications, people that are in the fiscal series, people that are in the HR series. I don't know if that's an exact number, but that's a pretty good number, a pretty good estimate. I think there is tremendous opportunity to have efficiencies in this project, and in fact, the way it is structured, one of the key positions in the office is a change management person. And we've already done quite a bit of work on that. We'll continue to do a lot of work to get people to think about more efficient ways to do the processing with the new system. That's the whole reason we're doing it. I'm a little cautious about putting a dollar amount of savings on the table, especially when you're talking FTE, because you know, the message I think that we have given to people who are likely to be impacted by this, who've been fearful, is that there's a lot of work for the state that's not being done. This system's going to take a while to roll out, and frankly, just at the rate that we have attrition and people turning over in jobs, I don't think this is going to be a big job killer, but people's roles will change a lot. We're going to automate a lot of things, and it will make us more efficient. You know, I think the other thing that is worth comparing is, although you have subscription fees, you're also getting constant updates, and you also have to consider the cost of a more traditional system where you would have to pay for all those upgrades and go through processes to upgrade your system, and that has cost as well.
Seeing no other questions, thank you, gentlemen. And I would like to invite David Axel up. We're all very excited to get the 90-day update from the Chief Enterprise Architect.
For the record, David Axtell, Chief Enterprise Architect. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. It's my privilege to present an update of my first 3 months as the state's Chief Enterprise Architect. My excitement and optimism have serving the state of Nevada has really only increased since my introduction here in August, when very shortly after I had started. I think it had only been a few days. The team under the State Office of the CIO has produced an exceptional strategy document, which, in addition to becoming a beacon of core IT for the state as a whole, will guide my enterprise architecture efforts moving forward. The purpose of establishing the statewide enterprise architecture is to benefit the constituency both directly and indirectly. Among the goals I've accumulated over the last 90 days, are to evaluate and define unified technology solutions that are more cost-effective through good of the state contracts. And this is in response to a GFO audit report 1704, page 10. They've identified that as something that was lacking. To establish policies and standards for IT procurement, another GFO audit report 1808, page 16. Again, this was something that I think will help induce contracts that encompass a more complete definition of what the needs are, so that hopefully we'll get a better set of contracts out there from procurement. Identify and socialize technology needs where these solutions will benefit multiple state entities, and that involves listening and identifying needs from various agencies, commissions, and boards that they have. And in many cases, in just a brief time I've been involved with reaching out, I've discovered needs that many agencies have, but they're looking at their own silo and their own specific needs. So it is somewhat limited in their solution. But when looking at a 90,000 or zoomed out look, we can see common needs that can be used across the state. So I believe very firmly it's likely we can come up with a solution that can satisfy everyone's individual needs while providing perhaps a single solution overall that the state can benefit from. Bringing new technology solutions to the state that better engage our constituents and address their web and mobile adoption. The state clearly has people who are wanting to move forward very fast, and it's not always possible with budget cycles and everything to accommodate the speed that Silicon Valley might handle that increase. But I think we should certainly try and keep that on the radar so that we'll have a bar that we can shoot forward. Collaborate with agencies, boards, and commissions to create a more unified communication solutions within the state. And this is something that, again, I've discovered that people are clamoring for something other than just an analog dial tone phone to pick up. And email is great, but there are a lot of communication solutions that will tie multiple approaches together. And so this is another goal that I'm looking at. Evolving towards a single source of truth for state information. This will reduce errors in the constituent and in the business and agency data. And I think frequently we see situations, Secretary of State comes to mind, that you log in to do business, you get shunted to a different site, you follow a link, you have to log in to yet another login and create credentials so that you can get tax information. And then you go to another site so that you can pay your unemployment. And so you move around to a number of places, and this creates several sets of truth which are not the same, and yet it's the same individual or the same business entity adding this data. So I think this is, again, it's a higher level goal, high bar, and it certainly is not going to be accomplished immediately, but it's something we need to look at so that we can move towards that in our solutions. And finally, reaching out to state entities and capturing technology wins. One of the things I've discovered was that there are lots of wins. People tend to talk a lot about some failures and some black eyes, but there are a lot of wins, and they don't get enough. They don't get enough press, in my mind, internally, not the bad press. And also, I think lessons learned is something that is something we shouldn't be afraid of. When we see something that doesn't go the way we want or it goes sideways, it's very typical that we don't learn from history. But I think history can really tell us from a technological standpoint, just a little step different can make a big difference in the outcome. And so I think capturing those lessons and sharing those for the benefit of all IT initiatives is something that's important. So far to date, I've taken a lot of tactical steps. Again, it's been a short period, but this tactical steps are on the road to unity, the road to creating an effective statewide enterprise architecture, and they include creating a state technology needs register. It's easy to hear these needs that people have, but it's critical to capture them so that when I hear them again and again, I can kind of put a check mark and say, this is getting more and more heavily weighted. These are common needs that are across different agencies. And so that will help with my communications in collaboration with other agencies and entities to capture those needs. I've coordinated with the Secretary of State's office, identifying several technology needs that they have that they would love to see be part of a solution. Some of the needs have actually been put up as bills and did not pass, but I think that it's a mistake just to let it die. I think these, especially when the needs are shared amongst agencies, it needs to continue to be put forth as a state solution that many can share in. I've partnered closely with the state purchasing to help identify some common solutions. We have some challenges sometimes where we have many solutions that are capable of being procured through state purchasing when we don't need dozens of desktop computer choices, for instance. So narrowing that down makes the purchasing procurement more powerful, and it also makes it simpler in terms of maintenance and management and updating and tracking of those things. I've leveraged most recently the state purchasing roundtable that was held up at Switch. Actually, it was yesterday. There was another meeting we had several weeks ago, perhaps it was a month ago, that kind of kicked that off. It was a much more limited meeting. This meeting yesterday involved many more entities in the state, and I hope we get to continue to benefit from that, not just our own traditional agencies or close to the chest, but other local and county facilities or groups could also benefit from this. And again, I think that just increases our leverage and decreases the cost of producing and procuring solutions. I've recently become a SME on the TIN review process, and that while this is after the big push, everybody else did all the hard work before I came on, it's given me a visibility into the types of technology solutions people are requesting, and it is invaluable because you can see how people think about their solutions when they put the TIN information together. So it's a fabulous dragnet for understanding what's happening across the state as people do update their TINs or produce new ones. On the other end of the spectrum, I've recently integrated with the SET system, the contract entry and tracking system. As you may know, EATS does a review and approval of technology contracts over a certain value. And this is another vector for accumulating information on technological solutions. Now, unlike the TIN process, which starts at the beginning, the SET system is at the end. So there's really very little opportunity to make a change in a direction somebody is proposing, or because the contract is right there ready to be executed. However, it's still another avenue, it's another vector to get information that might not be available in a TIN. So I view this as invaluable for pulling information in for enterprise architecture strategy for the state. I've recently joined the Smart 21 team as a SME for their key SME for their evaluation team, and I'm really looking forward to working on that. There's a lot of expertise in the program. Looks like it's really humming along quite well. So I'm sure the enterprise architecture team will be able to learn not only from what the solutions are and how they're being chosen, but the OPM in a bigger way, looking at project management and possibly program management for a broader use across all state technology needs. So in addition, and lastly, for those more recent accomplishments or activities, I've joined the STAR Evaluation Committee team as a solution evaluator. And again, the DMV project is a substantial technology effort. And so I'm looking forward to pulling in more information from that team to use in a broader sense after the official evaluation is completed, and then I can use some of that information more broadly against, for agencies in the benefit of how their program worked and their project has been working. The initial items that I have on the high-level items on the needs register at the moment that are kind of on the top of my radar are cloud solutions. Naturally, this is a core part of the road to Unity, so we're looking at I'm looking at all the different aspects, not just solutions, but the other elements within the cloud. What are the security requirements? And Bob is obviously, spearheading that, but these are all part of an architecture that needs to be put together so that when an individual or an agency is looking for a solution, they have all the questions laid out in front of them and they know what they need to ask for FedRAMP or HIPAA or FIS or any of the other FIPS, any of the other security requirements. So that's the cloud solutions portion. I'm looking at this is a recent addition, the descriptions of complex purchasing relationships. This is generally between technology and their attendant support services. A lot of times they're two separate items. They're split for purchasing purposes. And there's a tight relationship between the amount of certification knowledge that has to go into supporting these technological services. So it sometimes limits the type of solution that can be approached when somebody needs to find a network solution, for instance. You need to take into account many more things than just the specific technology of that network switch, the bandwidth, how it gets managed, et cetera. There's all of the people that have to support it over time that needs to be taken into account. So I'm looking at describing those complex relationships, and that will, I think, make purchasing's ability to identify when there's flexibility and when there's less flexibility a little easier, and hopefully come up with solutions that will be better for individual needs. Unified communications is on my needs register, and this, as I said before, I alluded to, not just dial tone, but it's digital voice, computer-based voice and video, text, SMS, and audio-video conferencing. So that whole gamut now is all part of a unified communication solution. So I believe we're looking at a trial, a real baby mini trial to see what's happening, and I'm hoping we can get some good baseline for where to move forward in a cost-effective manner, but still gets us into the 20th, if not the 21st century. Single sign-on solution, again, I was alluding to the disparate nature of single source of truth for data. Single sign-on is so critical, and while we may have it for some, our loose federation of agencies and entities promote really a very separate, siloed set of IT services in the back end. And so I think looking at this single sign-on that will work across agencies by either through federation or through integrating at a higher level will be helpful, because I think we can achieve a single sign-on and yet provide the power for individual agencies to still control and kind of be the masters of their own domain, so to speak, and yet we will still have a single sign-on, and possibly with integrating into a single source of truth, be able to really move forward, reducing errors, making things faster, and giving us a much more modern and safe aspect. The security aspect of this, I think, isn't touched on enough, but the single sign-on and the single source of truth is really key. It's very challenging to identify whether you have three different actors who are using your services, or it's just one actor with three different identities. And I think these are subtle but security-based issues that we can alleviate by a single source of truth and single sign-ons. And lastly, on the needs register, I have statewide geographic information systems. Again, this is something that was initially brought to my attention by the Secretary of State, but many, many agencies have needs for a GIS system, and some have, some use multiple systems. I've heard of one recently that uses 3 different systems, and while that may simply be because of an evolution of needs of different layers, I think if we take a more holistic look at this, I think we can come up with a solution that we would be able to add layers into a GIS system for individual agencies' needs without having to go with a whole new system. And so the incremental ability to add functionality would be a lot simpler and more direct than bringing on yet another GIS and having to integrate with another API, et cetera. So that's my list, my short list of high-level needs that I've identified. I know this will grow, and I also know full well that these will not be knocked off in weeks or months. But I'm hoping that many of these we can get some quick wins, and we can get some collaboration amongst and across agencies that will make it easier to get big wins and hopefully bring in those win dates into a shorter period, because everybody will be sailing in the same direction, the same heading, and wanting pretty much the same thing, as opposed to just going off into disparate directions. So I'm looking forward to having more updates for you next time in February, I think, or whenever shouldn't be presumptuous, whenever the next ITAB meeting meets. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address them. Thank you.
For the record, this is Paul Difflow. It's good analysis for 90 days, and I think your needs, your EA needs are spot on. Let me ask you this. I think the single sign-on example is perfect. I mean, I have wrestled with that in every company I've been with. Do you have plans to publish a set of EA principles that can help agencies at least stop digging the hole so that you can avoid the multiple credentials as one example?
David Extel, for the record, yes, we do. Mr. Chairman, I am intending, I haven't done it, I wanted to do it by now, but as you might imagine, the fire hose actually I thought would shrink, but it just keeps getting bigger. But our desire is to very shortly create an enterprise architecture working group. I don't call it a governance board because I think it's too immature at this point to presume anything like that, but I think at this point where we're learning and gathering data, I think a working group is very critical to engage with all agencies. And we have already a nub of a SharePoint site that we will be using to disseminate information so that people can see what we're doing. They can look at the needs register. They can look at what projects we have on our visible radar. But at this point, I'm not there yet. We still have more work to do. And honestly, I would love to say it would be ready to go and up and running by the next one, but that's my goal, that's my bar. But at this point, it's kind of a stretch goal. I'm trying to capture and put together a structure where I can at least have good visibility on all of these technologies. And so I think it may be a little more than another 90 days, but that's absolutely a goal of ours. Communication is absolutely key in sharing this, what we're learning with everyone else. So,
Yeah, that sounds right. Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion that people have for David?
For the record, Sherry McGee, I just want to thank you for your efforts so far. It's going to really make a huge difference for the state of Nevada to have an enterprise architecture and some guidance going forward, because over the years, all the agencies have just been, struggling and just picking whatever they can or the cheapest thing or whatever, and that's what's got us to this place today, and it's just going to make a huge improvement for the state as a whole. So thank you, and welcome aboard again.
Thank you very much. David Extel, for the record, I would just like to say one more thing. The Office of the CIO and Michael Dietrich has done a great job in putting strategies together, which I alluded in my opening, and I think this is part of the key of being able to have a successful enterprise architecture. for the state. And key to that is not an edict-based organization or governance, but listening to all the agencies and what their solutions are. And I think when we continue to work that way, we will get great feedback from people, because everyone likes to say how they've done so well in this area or that area. And I think it's key for us to be able to take these solutions and wins that every agency has, big or small, and be able to share that. So I'm looking forward to that, but I think this is a statewide, agency-wide effort. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
That'll take us down to agenda item 10, and we always like to ask members of the board if there's any specific agenda items that you'd like to see for the next meeting or the meeting after that. So we'll open it up for any suggestions.
For the record, Sherry McGee. I think I would like to have a further update from the Office of the CIO. I know in our last meeting, there was discussion about a website being stood up. I don't know if that's stood up yet, or what kind of information is going on there, or activities coming out of that office. So I think it would be good to have an update from the CIO.
Yeah, that's a good point. Michael tried to escape this meeting, so he delegated to everybody else. I'll make a note of that.
For the record, Patrick Cates, just back to my comments earlier in the meeting, I think we should think about adding something for other agencies' projects to get an update. I'm not quite sure what put our heads together with the Office of CIO, and maybe you, Mr. Chairman, on how best to approach that. It would be an awful long meeting if we asked every agency to update us in one meeting, so maybe we want to pick and choose. Maybe we can look at some of the tins and tires that we have and maybe pick an agency or something to come to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Anyone else? Okay, that'll take us down to agenda item 11, public comments. And I'll start in the north. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, I will ask down in Las Vegas, are there any public comments?
None here, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. So 2:55, I mentioned earlier that we might be able to give you back some time. Looks like we've been successful with that. And I think I was told the last meeting I don't need to ask for a motion to adjourn, that we can just say adjourn. So thank you, everybody.